We are going into our centerpiece segment. You know, one of those segments that I'm absolutely partial to. And I've been telling you about this conversation that, yes, I know along with myself, you have also been looking forward to. In centerpiece, we usually look at individuals that make differences in their own unique way. Today, we are speaking to somebody you're not entirely unfamiliar with. Of course, the last time we spoke to her, it was just after the publication of her book, What Women Want Coaches to Know, a gender intelligent coaching approach. Of course, none other than Rosieda Shabodien. Assalamu alaikum and welcome. Shukran for joining us.
Wa alaikum salam. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be here with this very dynamic person interviewing me again.
Likewise. So you know what? Now let's just talk about that. Come, I tell
Okay.
you how fabulous you are, and you tell me.
Let us do that.
No, you have a long history, yes, of course, as a gender and political advocate, as a political activist. You're an advocate for women's empowerment. You've contributed to many discussions on gender intelligent coaching and leadership. And of course, you were commissioner at the Commission for Gender Equality. You've always spoken up on behalf of women, particularly black women in professional spaces, and how they've been constrained and limited because of circumstances. And recently, and of course, I mentioned that conversation now, you've also added author
Yeah.
to your bio. And again, typically, Rosieda, now you are encouraging women to also do this. And you speak in your April newsletter about coaching writers to write. Is it exactly through your coaching experiences and through experiences with women that you realize that many women perhaps have the ability?
Sister Khadija, you know, I think that so many women all of us have stories within us. Yeah, but there's something that prevents us from putting our story, whether it's our PhD, our master's, a story about our recipe, a story about something that happened to you on paper, something between thinking about it and doing it. There's such a big gap. So alhamdulillah, when I completed my book, What Women Want Coaches to Know, and I'm so happy actually you're interviewing me during this time, the highly, yes, this very sacred time of Hajj, because it actually was on the Hajj journey that I made a commitment to complete my book. And as I was standing there in front of the Jamarats, you know, where you throw out what is holding you back, what makes you small, what is the things you are doing that that makes you that makes your talents suppress your talents, your skills you suppress it. And I stood on the Hajj journey and I thought that too is a sin. If Allah have given you divine talents and skills, which is no mistake, then you have to express that. And part of my commitment I made on Hajj was to complete my book, because I realized that I was playing small, and that too is a sin. Yeah. And so I'm happy that you're interviewing me during this period, because as the Hajj comes, I think, oh yes, that was my moment of reckoning. And so I know how difficult it was to write this book. All the negative things that we'll speak about. And before that also, I was coaching writers to complete their big works. Yeah. And when I was completed with this, I thought, let me not just coach people individually, let me get out a newsletter. Maybe it lands with someone. When they read it and they say, oh, that is me. That is preventing myself from doing what I have to do. Yeah. And in particular, as you say, women, you know, we've been told so many times, no, you can't, you shouldn't, you mustn't be here, that often we incorporate that in our soul and then we think we can't, but we can. Yeah.
I'm so happy that you're opening up the conversation exactly with that angle.
Yeah.
I would never have thought about it in that way. But something that we often speak about on Community Pulse is the multifacetedness of the human being.
Yeah.
And so you speak about being conditioned to be a certain way. We are conditioned within a liberal world to separate So we constantly have, I believe, a type of a restlessness within ourselves because we believe we need to separate our professional selves from our roles as mothers, as wives, as or whatever other, as fathers, as siblings. And we need to separate that from our professional spaces, and that needs to be separated from our spirituality. So I love the fact that you opened up the conversation like that. Again, reminding us that part of our duty, our obligation, our responsibility is to be of benefit to others, to humankind. And if we have a God-given skill or talent and we are withholding it from benefiting others, then indeed one can see how that is at best questionable, yes, at worst a sin.
Yeah. No, because Allah, I said Allah made us with all our divineness. And if we don't live out our life purpose, then what are we saying? Why were we created? And often, I think particularly women are faced with, I'm either a mother,
Yes.
or I'm a professional, or I'm this. I'm saying, Alhamdulillah, we don't have to live all lives. We can live and lives. And I am a professional, and I am a mom, and that's why I introduce myself. I'm an author.
Yes.
I'm a full-time mom. I am a full-time gender equity
You're also a
specialist.
daughter and a sibling.
And a daughter and a sibling. So you don't have to make this little choices that we were. Who made the choices?
Yes.
Yeah. And so.
So that in and
Yeah.
of itself is almost going back to the drawing board. And I
Yeah.
think so much of your writing has been about that. Yes, it's about sharing what you've discovered. And I remember the last time when we spoke, you spoke about also yourself, the self-doubt that you were plagued with when you embarked on a master's journey, where you committed yourself and you said, laat ek diep in myself
Yeah,
kyk. Miskien is dat eers. There's not a cut-off for age, is there?
Absolutely. And I hear, and the reason why I am so passionate about getting women to write, because I keep this picture in my head of meeting a person, a elderly, a older woman, not elderly, older person, probably around 65. And she came up to me and she said to me many years ago, she said, the one regret I have is I've never written the book that I wanted to write. That, and she looked so regretful about it. And that kept, that little story was kind of in my head. And I thought, how many people live with such a regret, what they could have done. And of course, that time I didn't have the opportunity to ask her, but what kept you away from completing this book? And she says, I'm a writer. And so for your listeners, I think that there is a lot of people walking around with stories in our head. But something prevents us of putting down it on paper.
Yeah.
And the lovely thing about writing, that is the wonderful thing of the writing craft. You don't need much. You just need a pen and paper. You don't even need a computer. Yeah. Whereas other creative avenues like painting and knitting and all of that, you need something more than just you and something else.
Yeah.
So writing for me is such a creative expression. And I'm saying to people, actually, it helps with the thinking. What is happening in your life? Write it down. Because it allows you to think through what is it that you want to tell the world. Yeah? Even or tell your children. It's like sometimes it's not the world.
Yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
it's just like, for example, I'm busy with writing kind of my stories of growing up in Elsie's River. And I write it for my children so that they know where I am now. I haven't been there before. I grew up in different circumstances. And you pay tribute then to your childhood and to your mom and to your dad. And because you're just saying, how did I get here?
Yes.
So
yes,
it's not
yes.
complicated. I think people make writing so complicated and then they get stuck.
But it's also a beautiful reminder of our own roots,
Yes.
of our identity.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking of the fact that, again, with colonialism and inhumane systems like apartheid,
yes.
we become almost ashamed and embarrassed of our roots. And so again, this feeling of restlessness,
Yes.
like, waar behoort ek regtig?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I imagine that process of even writing it down, reconnecting with our real
Yeah.
selves, with our forebears.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then one thinks about the importance of oral traditions within
Absolutely.
history and
Yes.
the history of communities. And for us to have that type of pride. And so say,
Yeah.
we all
Yeah, we have a
have
story,
we have a
Yeah.
story,
Yeah.
but yet again, in your professional capacity as a coach, you say that for many years, you mentioned this now,
Yes.
you've been coaching writers until such time where you said, let me give voice
Yeah.
to the writer inside me.
Yes.
But you've identified certain obstacles that you say that typically, that typically come to the fore, or that you
Yeah.
see in people. Tell us about some of those three main areas.
So one of the biggest thing is that inner negative voice. I call it negative Nancy in your head. Yeah, that says you can't. That voice also told me I can't. Ja, ek het praat Afrikaans. Hoe kan jy Engels skryf? Ja. Who are you to write a book on a recipe book on your recipes that you are so familiar with? Who are you to write a story about your Hajj?
Yeah.
Jy's mos nou nie 'n sheggie, hoe kan
You're
jy
a black
skryf?
woman from Elsie
Yes,
River.
yes.
Ah.
Yeah. So
How
it
can you do
is so negative Nancy is going to tell you can't. Yeah, and so for you, what is important for you to recognize is that that is just a voice that is there to protect you. Yeah, it's basically saying to you, don't do it because something will happen. Someone is going to say, Shanaz is going to say the book isn't good or the story isn't good. Yeah, so what I advise my writers to do, first write for yourself, for no one else. Yeah, because as soon as you bring out the outside world, you're going to think, but what is this one going to say? Wat gaan die ene say? So rather close the door. I call it closed door. Sit down and write first. Yeah, before you go and tell the world you are writing a book, and dan sal die world vir jou sê, wie is Jay?
Yeah. So you
And
call that
author-
right? Is that what you call writer's will?
Writer's will.
Ah.
Yeah. The writer's ability to say, for now, I'm just doing it for me. Yeah. You sit down, and that is the one thing you have to overcome. The ability, and I say it's a difficult move. The move is very complex. The move is to bend the knees, bend the hips, and sit in the chair. That's all you have to do.
However crudely you want to say is put your behind in a chair and don't move.
Ek wil nou nie daai op radio gesê het nie. Other times I do say it. But basically you have to close the door, sit in your chair and start writing. For no one else but you. Because niemand gaan weet wat jy skryf nie.
Yes, of course.
So that's the one thing. And then the other thing is also to, a lot of people have ideas about how the book should look. Ja, ek kan nie Engels praat nie, en wie gaan my help met die? And there's a whole world out there that helps you with your book or with your story. There's editors, there's mentors, there's coaches, there's people help if they see that there's something on paper. So that's the other advice I give people. You can't edit a blank page.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now how do you get the page filled with words? If
You-
how
yeah.
do you then start developing something or this writing
Yes.
process? Because ultimately now you've put that specific part of your anatomy in
Yes,
the chair.
Yes.
You said, let me sit here. You have your book and your
Yeah.
pen.
Yeah.
Or you have a computer screen.
Absolutely.
The
yeah.
pressure of filling it with words.
Yes.
Well, how does that work?
And so I often tell people, don't make the story complicated. What is the gift you want to give the world? Okay. So, for example, with PhD candidates, I say, what is the knowledge gift that you want to give the world? Yeah, that's all that you're doing. Master student, you are thinking about a particular area, and then you're going to come to a conclusion. That conclusion you want to give the world. You write a story. What is it that you want to give the world? My examples, I write a story so that my children know who I am. How did I get here from then to now? Yeah, so it's my gift to my children to know their lineage. Yeah, so it's not. So I don't want your listeners to think that it is an easy journey. Yeah,
Okay.
writing is difficult because it's asking I questions. What do you think? Yeah. So it says, Rosieda, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? And then you think, oh, it's asking me what am I
So it's
thinking?
like I need to be
Yes,
accountable,
yes,
and
yes,
it's my
yes,
opinion.
yes. And then it is your opinion. So just write it down. Yeah. Later on, you can figure out what other people's opinions are. First, I say, then they say.
Okay.
I say, then they say. Yeah.
But I think very importantly, what you note is that I want to go back to
Yes,
the self
yes.
doubt, and that plagued with self doubt, that feeling. You say that that's actually part of the process. That don't feel like you shouldn't be stuck there. You should see that as part of the process.
I often tell my coaching clients that writing is difficult. Don't g- and the reason why a lot of writers stop writing is they thought it was going to be easy. Koleka praat ek en jy dan nou, né? So you think
The
like
theory
yeah,
around
yeah,
writing,
yeah.
yeah.
So because now you think if I had to write this down now, and then it's going to be more difficult because in the writing journey you have to think what you want to say and then put it down on paper. How wonderful that gift. Think, put it on paper. And so there's a lot of fear in that about the thinking part and putting it on paper. And so we struggle with that because when we speak to each other, the words can blow away. But if we write, the words is there on paper. Did I say that? Am I thinking this? Yeah. And so it is a difficult process, but if you know it, then you develop strategies to not allow that fear to make you run away from the paper. Yeah? And so the first thing I tell writers is to say to yourself, it is going to be difficult. Then the brain settles a bit. So I work in neuroscience in terms of settling the brain. Or we were not taught about the brain at school level in terms of how we manage our brain because it's only our brain that is saying, oh, this is going to be difficult. And the brain is saying, a tiger is coming. And you have to tell the brain, it's not a tiger, it's actually a little kitten. Yeah?
Because
And then,
instinctively I want to cower away.
yes. So the brain is thinking something big is coming to eat me up, but it's not. And so I often work with neuroscience to calm the brain to say, okay, let us reframe this and say, actually, what we're busy with is a difficult task, but it's not something that's going to destroy you. Yeah? And so often when writers sit even when they get themselves to sit at the table, they are so scared because they haven't looked at their brain at all because the brain is saying, here's something coming, here's something coming. And even like little things like writing a recipe. Yeah. So I often encourage women that cooks well. I say, sure, that's a story right there. How did you get to that recipe? Who taught you that recipe? How did you change it? Yeah. What did you add? That's a story right there. But often when they get to the point of sitting down and writing, they think, what is happening? Why am I suddenly scared?
Feeling jittery.
But I can stand next to someone and tell her the whole recipe. And then I did that. And then I decided I want to put more cloves in. And the story just flows.
Is this tied to? And I'm just thinking
Yeah.
as you're speaking to ideas around sometimes one's reticence to commit to something, because if something is there on paper, it's essentially, as you say, it's my words, and I'm affirming in almost like in a public way. So yes, whether in that moment it's just between myself and that piece of paper, but it's commitment, which also speaks to me having to be accountable to something that I wrote that down. And if it is that, then why do we fear that? I mean, you speak about neuroscience, so that's
So
interesting.
basically what we have to realize that in our way of being, we often want to be liked. We don't like not to be liked. Yeah? And so we're very careful with our writing because what if people don't agree with it? So when I wrote my book, Yeah? I thought, oh, what is the other coaches going to say? They're going to have problems with it. They're going to say this. They're going to say, of course, that's what's going to happen in your mind. Who is going to say what? You would have to develop the confidence or the routine. That's why I'm saying door close. I often hear writers walking around saying they're writing. I'm writing this book. I'm doing the PhD. I'm doing my master's. And I often wonder whether that creates more anxiety. Yeah, you have your little tribe around you, which I had, confidants that is helping you along the journey of writing. And then when you have something on paper, yeah, like something substantial, you open the door and you say to people, what do you think? But by that time, you've developed a certain confidence about your writing. Then you can open the door and say, I always say, don't ask your best friend, because she might also want to write. And then she gives you feedback and you are heart sore because she said she didn't like it, or you must change it, or it didn't sound right. So give it to people that is in the writing journeys as well. Yeah, to feedback. So I think that we have a lot of people walking around with stories. All that they have to do, and what I often ask is, the question I often ask people, where does it live in your diary? Where have you committed time to it? Yeah? Like I say, when I coach my clients, I say, can I see your diary? Because if you run to write a book, do a PhD, do a master's, whatever you do, run a marathon, where does it live in your diary? Yeah. How did you become the person that chooses your time? And that is such an important skill because we choose our time.
Yes.
We say, it's Zuhr. I have to choose to go and make salah. You choose, you're the captain of your time. And often we think we don't have to choose. But you actually have to say, if I want to write a book, I have to make time in my diary, an hour, 30 minutes, 2 hours, whatever time you have. And I work out with writers, what is their writing style? Yeah, because sometimes you don't know. And so when I say the writer's walk, basically how to walk, how do you do your walk? Yeah, so some people write in little snippets. Yeah, they get up in the morning, and after Fajr they start writing. Yeah, some people can only write when they have days, like a whole weekend. Yeah, like kind of block writing. You get to know your writing style, but don't use it as an excuse.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I work with says they don't have time, and if I go through their diary, I'm saying, actually, you haven't chosen your time. And so I move away from the concept of time management. I'm saying 1 o'clock becomes 2 o'clock, becomes 3 o'clock. You can't manage time. You can't stop it. You can't move it faster or slower. All that you can do as a writer is to choose your time. I'm going to do it this time or that time. And Khadija, you know why I ask people to choose their time? Because sometimes life happens.
Yes.
So you're saying, alhamdulillah, I've got a free day. Yeah? And then suddenly your mom calls to say, I'm not feeling well, I need to, can you come through?
Yes.
Then you wrap up your 8 hours that you would have written and you move it to another place in your diary. It's not forgotten, because that's what happened. If it's not in your diary, it's forgotten. That you were going to write and suddenly there's no more time. Yeah?
But that can easily become an excuse also.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, time is what you choose. You're the captain of your time.
But
Yeah?
I like where this goes, because I'm thinking at the start of that already, even when it comes to one planning this, there's so much about oneself that one is getting to understand, because that whole process is also a process of reflection and introspection, where I get to understand, but I'm a procrastinator.
Yes.
Or I'm the sort of person that clearly, I don't like to take responsibility for my actions. I don't want to be held accountable. So as soon as I do X, and of course those are harsh realities that many of us don't like to face, because after all is said and done, then we say, but I'm paying the bills and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. But there's also many parts of ourselves that we would rather leave obscured, or we would rather not even face ourselves. And I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, those are
Yeah.
harsh truths, because you speak also in your newsletter of one particular writer, and you call her writer Wendy, and you said she struggled with procrastination. And then you faced it head on with
Yeah.
her. You said she needs to face it. You needed to diagnose the problem. You needed to understand how is she going to work with that and a severe case of self-doubt, and then somehow embraces, but then move forward so that she can develop her own unique process. Is that possible?
So when we call things procrastination, self-doubt, insecurity, I often say that is suitcase words. Yeah, it's like it's a suitcase with a procrastination label on top.
Oh, okay.
When I coach, particularly women, I open up that suitcase. Yeah, and I want to know what is in there. Because often we use these terms not to allow ourselves to go deep in there. What is procrastination? What does procrastination look like for Rosieda? And what does procrastination look like for you? Yeah.
Oh my word, that's brutal. Honesty.
Yes. And nothing becomes an excuse then. Because often we say, "Oh, I'm insecure." Yeah, let us open it up and see how your insecurities show up. And sometimes it is you kind of, because it's words have meaning, and if we words are powerful. So if we say we're procrastinating and we don't unpack what it means, then it means we can't solve it. Yeah. And so I'm saying open the suitcase and say, and then sometimes we say, oh, it's actually not procrastination. Yeah. Sometimes it's just fear. Or sometimes it's just, I have this idea of this book, but I don't want to do the hard work. Yeah, I don't want to sit down and miss out on the friends circle and, kind of have an easy life. Yeah. And so I'm saying that the writing journey is one of, you chose it chose you. And that's the other thing that I want to tell people, that not everyone wants to write. Yeah.
Yes.
Not everyone wants to do a PhD or master's. But if that was put into you as part of how you're going to live your life, then do it. Complete it. Because that is your journey that you have to travel, your life purpose, part of your life purpose. And so don't just kind of, not respect it. Yeah. And so I want people that has the story, that has this idea that they want to achieve something, that they actually choose the time in their diary to make it happen. And one of the reasons before, when people said that they wanted to write, I would dish out books. Stephen King on writing, Anne Lamont on Bird by Bird, writing persistence book. I would dish
All the
it
theory.
thinking, like that is going to get people going. Yeah. And then I realized, actually, sometimes you need to learn the writing craft, and I advise people to do that, like join writers groups, read on writing, on how to write. Yeah, that's part of the process, but don't let that become the reason why you don't write. Mine was, I can't write lekker Engels. Yeah. Then someone said to me, but Rosieda, that's where the editor comes in. Just write. And I thought, oh yes, yeah. An editor can fix the grammar, the is and was, wers, and all of that. That just goes above my head. Yeah. But as I was writing, I got to kind of get into the English language. Yeah. I could speak it.
Yes,
But whether I could write it was a different thing.
But that again speaks to almost our fear around being judged,
Yes.
or being boxed.
Yes.
And now I want to refer to the very beginning of our discussion, where we spoke about how we as black women in particular, we've been conditioned to think about ourselves as inferior in so many ways. So our starting point already, the playing fields are uneven, and so one already has that entrenched. And so I imagine a large part of that is first overcoming that. And so I like when you speak also in your newsletter, you say, write down these negative questions that your inner critic is throwing at you and answer them as if you were in court defending your right to write.
Absolutely. Because, we allow that inner negative Nancy to run the show. You can't write. We don't answer it. Yeah. They say, oh, but you can't speak. You can't write a PhD. Who in your family has done a PhD? Yeah. You have to answer that. Otherwise, if you don't, as you say, it runs the show. Basically, Judge Judy is running the show.
Yeah.
She puts you into jail. It says to you, can't, and then you say, okay, I'm in prison now. And so all that I'm saying is, as the thoughts come up, as you sit down, finally you're sitting down.
Yes.
And then it comes. Judge Judy is saying this, negative Nancy is saying that, and all that I'm saying is, then answer it. Oh, yes, I actually am a little bit nervous about putting this thought on paper because I'm scared that someone is going to say something. Yeah, and then you have to answer it to say, but no, don't worry about it now. First put it on paper, then we'll speak about that obstacle next time. Yeah, so you answer the things that are coming up. But what we do is that we don't answer it, and then that question is like truth.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't write. You can't do this. You can't supposed to do that. And I like the fact, Khadija, that you bring up this issue around women. So, of course, both men and women struggle with writing. Yeah, there's no two ways about it. But women in particular has been told so many times, you can't, you shouldn't, you mustn't. So somewhere, and I always say it infiltrates your soul. And then suddenly you think, I can't, I mustn't. Who told you that? And often when we unpack that, we realize it's someone said something to you or didn't even say something to you. It's just the atmosphere that we grow up that women are not supposed to. We have to unlearn that. Because remember, Allah has created us. Allah doesn't create second-hand stuff.
Of course.
Allah creates these for us, for all of us to achieve our potential.
Yes.
And so for me, part of the writing for people to become writers, and particularly women to become writers, is to say we're living up to our highest potential. We don't mess around.
Yeah.
Because we were not made for second-hand or
Absolutely
we were not
not.
thrift store stuff,
Absolutely not. And we have beautiful stories to tell. I think what you say there is so important because it's something that often comes up, on our show as well, that this is never a playoff between men and women. It's never about that. It's about showing that there is complementarity, but we need to be participative in that process.
Absolutely.
And so we don't want to entrench, but I first have to recognize that I have embodied this idea around being, like you say, second-hand citizen, and then I can actively participate.
Yes.
And that's a responsibility of every single member of society.
Yeah.
But then I also wanted to ask you this question. Does everything, because you speak about this idea that there's a story within us and that in so many ways it can be therapeutic for us to also get to know the various layers of ourselves, the various parts of ourselves.
Yes.
Does every story have to be published?
Now, so that's important. Often we are thinking that we're looking at the book already. We're attending the book launch and we think, oh, I can't be that.
The caterers, what am I going to serve?
Yes. We are so scared. And I'm saying to my writers, to the writers that I'm coaching, sometimes the book is like I'm coaching someone that is writing a book just for her grandchildren. She's going to publish it, but she doesn't want to have this book out there. She just wants them to know this is what the stories that was read to her. Yeah? And so some people don't have that ambition, and that is fine. You're still a writer when you don't publish. Yeah? Some people go through journeys of academia. Yeah, but when you go through the journey of academia, you're published, but the publishing happens just in certain quarters. Ordinary people like me have no idea what you're busy with. And so I often, when I speak to PhDs, professors, and that, like, you can take that and gift it to the world in plain language. Yeah. So I just want to, for particular for your listeners, don't worry yet about publishing and not publishing. And now we're in the world of self-publishing also. You don't even have to get an editor. Don't worry about it yet, because that is what is going to kind of not allow you to first put things on paper.
Yeah.
That is the second, third phase. What do I do with my writing now? Yeah, but often what we do sometimes is that we already have the book, or we're graduating already. I'm saying no. Like what I call like kind of take it one step at a time. Yeah, it's step one is get it on paper.
Yes.
Step two is now you need to open the door and consult. Confidant people that can help you, that is not going to throw shade on your writing because you're still a little bit unsure. And then you decide, is this now, what do I do with this product? Do I do it in a book? Do I do it? I mean, that's what you have to do. You can't start from the beginning wanting a New York bestseller.
Yes.
Yeah, no, so often we get into that, yeah. Like when I coach clients, they already have this picture and they're not going to be able to launch the book at exclusive. Like who said exclusive? Yeah, maybe it is
Who
a
said
launch
that's
at
the
your,
yardstick?
maybe it's a launch at your house. You know, it depends on your book. We can be creative nowadays. We don't have to go through the one route only. So I would advise the listeners that has got that burning writing aspiration in them is to not already start out with that big pressure about where they're going to publish and for who they're going to publish. Just write. Yeah.
But yourself, and I'd like our last few minutes,
Yes.
for our last few minutes to sort of pause there. Often one thinks about creative writing
Yes.
as being separate from sort of non-fiction.
Yeah.
Or like this book
Yes.
that you've written, which is, of course, it's a work of non-fiction, even though you draw from your years and years of coaching experience. You have done that.
Yeah.
You've crossed that boundaries
Yes.
quite comfortably. Speak to us a little bit about that. How did you manage that process? Was it something very conscious? Is there a different sort of process that entails
Yeah.
in terms of how you approach that book?
So there's different genre of writing, yeah. So there's the fiction, which I admire these authors. We were now at a book launch
Yes.
where someone just kind of think up stories, yeah, and they just write it down. I admire that. That's called fiction.
Yes.
Yeah. It's obviously based on factual stuff, but it is in the area where you give yourself permission to imagine, yeah. And so in the creative nonfiction, that's the memoir stuff. Yeah, you write up a recipe and you say, oh, and then my grandma said this and that. That's creative nonfiction, where you write it down but poetically. Yeah, like more
Storytelling. Also.
storytelling, but it's also based on truth.
Yes.
Yeah, not at that moment. Maybe someone told you that 10 years ago and now you write it into the story at this moment. Yeah, but it's based on truth. So that is, and then you get just nonfiction. Yeah, the PhDs, you have to prove what you're saying is absolutely the truth, if that ever exists. Yeah, but there's the
But there's
mainstream,
empirical data,
the empirical
there's research,
data,
back it
and
up.
so you write. Then you say this is what I say and this is what they say, and that too must match. Or you say this is what they say and I don't agree what they say. So that's the three genres. There's the fiction, the kind of novels,
Yes.
kind of stories. Then there's creative nonfiction, the memoir type. And then there is the nonfiction. And often, I think people often move towards the fiction and creative nonfiction. And I think that the kind of academics, the kind of serious writers goes into the nonfiction writing. Yeah, the kind of cold, hard facts. But I mean, as your listeners are listening now, kind of, and thinking, am I a writer? If you're thinking already that, then something in you are saying something needs to come out, some story. Yeah. And the next question should be, and what is that story?
Yeah.
What is the main story that you want to tell? Not a lot of stories. I always say that's where you get people they want to tell too many stories. They want to tell about the rugby and then about the cricket and then about the soccer. I say choose one story and start there. Yeah. Choose one entry point into your life as a writer, not all over the show. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's also when you speak about your almost like your responsibility
Yeah.
to bring the story to life. So whether it's the research,
Yes.
the academic research,
Yes.
or whether it is the story. You say in your the next step is then to discuss this writing walk and how to
Yes.
develop this unique writing process. And inshallah, I'm hoping
Inshallah.
that in our next conversation,
Yes.
we're going to be focusing on that.
Inshallah.
So for now, I'm going to ask you your concluding remarks to all of our aspiring writers out there. There's many of them listening, I know.
Wonderful. I'm so happy that we have a community that is, kind of our big instruction was to read.
Yeah.
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 And after reading is writing. You read something someone has written. Ikra. And then someone has written something for you to read. So culturally, we are writers. Yeah. And so I'm so happy, Khadija, that you got me at this point, as I said in the beginning when I opened. It is the Hajj period. It's a period of kind of really confronting you as a human being. Who are you? We can't come from this very high spiritual journey and not be changed people. And so, and even if you haven't been on Hajj, yeah, our Hajj is what we do, our reckoning with ourselves we have to do every day. And I often say the reckoning is, am I living my life purpose? When I look back on my last moment, can I say to myself, I lived my life purpose? Yeah. And often we try to minimize our lives. Like we said, that's why we use this thing. I'm only this. I'm only that.
Yeah.
When alhamdulillah, we can live expansive lives. And so that's my ending. Let us live expansive lives in honor of Allah that has created us. Yeah, that is our ibadah, to be able to live to our highest potential. Let no one tell you that you have to play small. You can't, you mustn't. That's not what we were put down in earth to do. So, alhamdulillah, right time to speak on writing. And I'm asking the listeners, first things first, sit down, get it in the diary, close the door, and start writing.
Yeah, let us with humility say, instead of I'm only that, let me say with humility, I am all of that.
Yes.
And I'm a work in progress.
Absolutely.
And it's my responsibility to
Alhamdulillah.
keep being more
Yes.
and to be of benefit. Rosieda, it's always a pleasure speaking to you. Shukran so much for sharing. And yes, indeed, we look forward to having many more conversations on this and encouraging ourselves, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, walaikum salam.